In 1863, John Morrissey was a notorious casino owner and a very rich man, but he's kind of notorious. You know, he was a bare knuckle heavyweight champion. He was a bouncer in brothels and a bouncer for Tammany. But he's also obviously very, very smart, although he never got past the 4th grade, and he wanted to have some pastime for his gamblers in the daytime rather than the waters. And he thought he might have a horse race. And so in 1863, he held the first meet at Saratoga, which was later called Horse Haven. At that time, it was called the Old Harness Track. And it would be, if it was around a day, it would be right parallel to the Oklahoma track on the Union Avenue side. And so the next year, there was such a success that the next year he had the track built in the present site. And the first race on the first day of the opening of the Saratoga track was the Travers. And it was named for William Travers, who was a financier out of New York City, a beau vivant. He liked to drink and he had a great sense of humor. He had a stutter. And he came up late one night and his wife said, "Is that you, dear?" He says, "Was it anybody else you was expecting?" But he was pretty much a front man for Morrison. Morrison knew that damn well he wouldn't get checked anywhere near the business that Travers did. When they first opened, it brought the money up there. You know, Mr. Jerome and Mr. Travers, and he probably had to pick somebody. And why not Mr. Travers, who was well-liked, had a lot of money, and was a horse owner. And it turns out, ironically, Travers was part owner of the Kentucky, who won the first Travers. And Kentucky wound up being in the Hall of Fame. He was a very good horse. He wound up, in fact, he won the first 2 editions of the Saratoga Cup. He was 6 for 6 at Saratoga. And ever since then, it's just been taken off. It's still one of the premier races in the United States. Probably obviously not as important as the Derby. But 22 Hall of Fame horses have actually won the Travers. And 12 Hall of Fame horses were also ran at the Travers. The Travers is the second oldest stake in the United States. The first was the Phoenix, which is it was held at many, many places down in Lexington. Now it's held at it's a Grade 2 race at Keeneland. And it was raced back in the 1830s. But the Travers is the second oldest race. For one thing, the Triple Crown didn't come around until about 1930. You know, they first started talking about it. In the mid-20s, they aren't sure exactly when. I don't know who actually decided that would be the three Triple Crown races, but that's the way it turned out. By then, of course, the Kentucky Derby was extremely popular, a lot more popular than the Travers. Preakness actually wasn't even run for a long time. It was run, but it wasn't really a stakes race. It was a low-level allowance race. And then it came back and became popular again. And then the Belmont, there were 3 races. The way they were scheduled, they were not all the same sequence. It wasn't like always the Derby first, the Preakness second, and the Belmont third. That came later. But the way that I think it was a sequence helped, because the Travers is always a 4th. And Triple Crown is something, even the English had a Triple Crown. I think that's where they got the term from. And you couldn't really have a quadruple crown. So because of that sequence, the way they were raced, I think that's why they became the Triple Crown races. There's a bunch of horses that back in the 1870s were actually in the Hall of Fame. Harry Bassett is another one that's in the Hall of Fame that won the race. In fact, one of the best ones was Ruthless, the New York State-bred filly, who was in the Hall of Fame. And she also not only won the Travers, but she was the first horse to win the Belmont, the first Belmont Stakes in 1867. If you go through the list of the Travers winners, an awful lot of either great horses or Hall of Fame horses. And I think not every year was good. And it's like the Derby had a lot of down years also. But I say generally, it always was a very popular race. And it was well received by the public from the very first race. And it was magic. It was probably much more popular than the Kentucky Derby until, in fact, the Kentucky Derby didn't become real popular until Regret won the race in 1915 and Old Rosebud in 1914. Until then, I would assume you would have to say that Travers was more important than the Derby. Since then, it's the other way around. You didn't have pari-mutuel betting. In fact, New York State was the last state in the country to have pari-mutuel betting, so you had a betting ring, and we had bookies accepting bets. And when they first ran the Travers, for about the first 10 years, they had a section set off for women, separate from men, to watch the race and to bet. But they would come up in their carriages. They would park their carriages on Union Avenue, up and down Union Avenue, and then walk into the track. They didn't have any real parking lot until later on. It would get I think if there were 20,000, they'd be happy. I don't think it helped. They never took attendance. No, there weren't any attendance figures for any track till after World War II. But so they're guessing around maybe 15,000, 20,000 would be the most popular event. They would come up by train. Obviously, it would be the most popular form of transportation until, say, 1915, 20, when the car became popular. That was about the best way to come up here. And they used to have what's called the Canavan Special, which are all the bookies would come up in this one train. They all come en masse, and then they go to the track together. Godfrey Walbaum, who owned a track in Gutenberg, New Jersey, he was a very notorious person, very uncouth, in fact, pretty much a crook. When he bought the track, he drove the track into the ground. And in fact, in 1896, there wasn't even a meet. So there's no Travers in 1896, and he ran out of money, and there's no Travers from 1898, 1899, or 1900. And he finally sold it to William C. Whitney in 1900, and William C. Whitney and two or three other people got together and they refurbished the track. They bought the land that the Oklahoma training track is on now, and they fixed up the track and made it what it is today. Made an awful lot of improvements to it. The good horses just weren't going to the track anymore because it was all fixed. He was just a terrible, terrible person. And because they had other places to go to, Monmouth was always the other track that people go to. And a lot of horses, even when Saratoga was popular, horses would go from Monmouth to Saratoga and back again, because they had the summer meet at the same time that Saratoga ran theirs.